Welcome. This is makeyourownbrewhq.com, and this is going to be my first ever brew. The brew kit that I'm going to be using is a Brewer's Best brew kit, and it's a Vienna Lager, but I'm going to be making it as an ale. The reason I'm making the Vienna Lager is because I have family coming to town in July, and they're fans of Dos Equis Amber and Negra Modelo, which are Mexican lagers. They're basically Vienna lagers just brewed in Mexico. I'm not going to be doing it as a lager. I'm going to be doing it as an ale, and we'll get into that in a little bit. This is Extract Brewing, by the way, and I've read the chapters in How to Brew by John Palmer on Extract Brewing, not only the quick start brew, but also the complete section on extract brewing. So if you don't have this book, I highly recommend you pick it up. Okay, I also have a notebook, and you want to take notes, I'm told, on your brews so that you can keep track of what you're doing. So you can see what you did right and what you did wrong, and if anybody asks, well, how did you do this, you can always look back and look it up. So I'll be making notes in that. First, let's go over the equipment. The equipment kits that you get are excellent, but when you first open up that box, it can be a little scary because you have a lot of equipment in there, and some of it might not be familiar to you, and you don't know what to do with it. So I recommend that you read up a little bit in the book to find out that, hey, you're not using all this equipment at the same time. You're only using specific pieces of equipment during specific portions of the brew. The brew cycle is brew day, and then you have the fermenting cycle, and then you have the bottling, and there's different equipment that's used for all through that. So we're just going to talk about the equipment that is used on brew day, okay? First of all, you're very important, you need a brew pot, okay? A lot of people will tell you that you need a pot, that you can just use any pot in your pot arsenal, as long as it's over like 3 gallons. I went with a 5-gallon stainless steel brew pot, a pot that I purchased specifically for brewing, because I don't want anything else in here, and I don't want to ruin any of my other pots if something goes wrong with the brew, okay? So I got a 5-gallon stainless steel brew pot. Came with a lid. We're not going to use the lid because you don't want to boil this stuff with the lid on. I also have my fermenting bucket with a lid. And you notice it's got a little grommet hole here, and that's where your airlock goes, okay? So we have the airlock. We have a hydrometer, which gives us our original gravity as well as our final gravity. We'll be using this today. I have a thermometer, very important to make sure that your wort, which is beer before the yeast is added, is at the correct temperature before you add the yeast. If you add it at the wrong temperature, you can damage your beer, you can damage the yeast. I also have a nice big brewing spoon. I've already put 2 gallons of water in here, just tap water. I just want to sanitize this bucket. I've cleaned the bucket, I've cleaned all this equipment. 2 gallons of water in the fermenter, and then I added 2 tablespoons, that's 1 tablespoon per gallon of whey single step, no rinse cleaner. It's also a sanitizer, it's a 1-step. Make sure you follow your instructions on whatever sanitizer that you use, because the ratios aren't going to be the same, okay? So mine calls for 1 tablespoon per gallon of water. I have 2 gallons in my fermenter. I'm going to add all the items that will be touching the wort after it's boiled. It's not important to sanitize anything like the pot. You don't have to sanitize that. Anything that touches the wort while it's boiling is fine. Okay, I'm also going to sanitize my scissors because I'm going to be cutting up open some packages, and I don't want any contaminants getting into the packages. So I'm going to let those sit in there for a little bit, and then we'll talk about what comes in the Brewer's Best Vienna Lager brew kit, which again, I'm going to be making it as an ale. Okay, so in there comes the instructions. Now you want to make sure that you have everything that is listed here in the contents and the ingredients. You want to make sure that, because you don't want to stop your brew in the middle and have to run out and get something. So before you start your brew, make sure that you have all your ingredients and everything that's supposed to be in the package. All right, 2 things that come in the package that we will not be using today are the bottle caps that come with it. There's 60 count of bottle caps that come in there. We're going to be using those on bottling day, not today. So we can set those aside. And then we have the priming sugar, which is also used on bottling day to give the yeast something to eat while they're in the bottle. And we're not going to be using that today. All right, so let's start with the specialty grains. We have crushed Vienna malt and we have crushed crystal malt, okay? These are the two malts, not malts, these are the grains that we will be using, and we're going to be putting them in a muslin bag. It's also supplied with the kit, one muslin bag for both the grains to go into. And then we have the extracts, the dried malt extract, and we also have liquid malt extract. And I'm going to be putting this in some warm water to soften it up before I put it into the brew, just to make sure I get every goodness out of there, every single piece. And we also have some corn sugar, and that's also added at the same time as the two extracts. Okay, so the last thing, well, not the last thing, but we have the bittering hops, which in this case is the Brewer's Gold bittering hops. Okay, and then we have the finishing hops, which is Willamette aroma hops, and that will be added at the very last part of the boil. And then we also have yeast. Now this is the lager yeast that was included in the kit. I read the instructions on the kit, and they also say that you can make this into an ale and you can just use this yeast. But I talked to my brewer and he recommended Nottingham's ale yeast, and that's what I'm going to actually be using today instead of this yeast. I am going to set this yeast aside and use it and just save it in case I need yeast at some point. I have 2.5 gallons of pure water that I bought from the store in the brew pot, and it's currently at a temperature of 150, between 150 and 160, which is what we want to steep our grains at. I went ahead and I bought 6 gallons in 1 gallon bottles. 3 of those gallons are back in the back fridge, and they've been cooling down for 24 hours now, so that will have some help in cooling the wort after it's been boiled. I've got 6 gallons of water. I also have just some plain water in a squirt bottle. I've labeled it water because I don't want to mix up my water and my sanitizer, because I'm going to be using the water in case the boil starts to boil over. The squirt bottle will help get the foam down so that we don't have a big sticky mess all over the kitchen stove. So, and I also have the sanitizer. I'm just going to set that aside. I'm using that to just sanitize anything that I think needs sanitizing. I've been told that your first brew, your first couple brews, you really want to concentrate on sanitization and fermentation. So those are the two big things that first-time brewers really go wrong with. So I've made sure that everything's really clean, and I've got the stuff in the sanitizer soaking, and that's good there. And then I have just a little extra sanitizer there. So our temperature in our brew pot is between 150 and 165, like I was saying. You want to steep your grains. So I've got the grains. We're going to, bear with me because this is the first time I've ever tried to put anything in a muslin bag. I probably should have opened up this before I did that, but we'll see if we can do it one-handed here. All right, so like that. Get all the goodness out. We got a second bag here. All right, not too bad. Hey, he can pour grain into a muslin bag. So I'm going to go ahead and set this in the brew pot. First newbie mistake, I didn't make a note of the time. Let's say it was around 12:25, so I'm going to write that down really quick. And let's do this now. I'm going to add some hot water that I boiled in a tea kettle into just a dish. This water is never going to touch your brew, so you don't have to worry about it. Put enough in there to do. I just want to soak this in hot water to get it to be able to soften up so that it'll pour easily, and I can get all the malt out of there. So this is the liquid malt. That's what you do with the liquid malt. I'm going to set that aside. My steeping got to 180 degrees when it was supposed to be between 150 and 165, so I'm making a note of that in my mistakes book. Hopefully sometime soon it'll be my hey, what you did right book. But right now, the mistake I made is I let the steeping water get to 180 degrees, which isn't quite a boil, but yeah, you're not supposed to boil the grains. So if something's off about this brew, I can refer back to my book and say, hey, it was probably this. So we are at 12:45 exactly, and I'm going to pull the muslin bag out. So I put my strainer under it. It's soaking it's in the strainer. The bottom of the strainer is not in the water. It's now called wort. Now that the grains are done, it's called wort. So it's not in the wort itself. So it's going to allow the grains to dry. Not dry, but just drain. Again, you don't want to squeeze the grains. Don't want to squeeze the muslin bag. I've seen a couple YouTube videos where people are like, oh, I want to get all the goodness out of it. And I think you're making all the badness come out. So we've already gotten all the goodness out of it, and we're just going to let it dry by, or drain by gravity. This is thoroughly drained now, and so we're going to take the grains and just toss them in the trash. I am tossing it in the trash here. This is not just on the floor. We're done with this. I'll set this aside. All right, so we have the dry malt extract. I'm going to open that up. Now they just say add all of it in the instructions. I don't know if I don't think there's any time schedule on this. I just think you want to make sure that it gets mixed in. I've turned the heat off here. Because I don't know how long it's going to take me to get all of this mixed in. So I'm going to grab my liquid extract, which has been soaking in a hot bath, and I flipped it over a couple times to try to get everything. See if that actually worked. Pours. All right, so I got the corn sugar. Remember, there's two types of, well, it's all sugar basically coming in this kit, but there's two types of powdered sugar in there. There's the priming sugar and the corn sugar. Make sure you use the corn sugar for this. The priming sugar is for the bottling again. I'll pour a little in. There was nothing in the instructions regarding what sequence all this stuff goes in. It just says add all of the dry malt extract, the liquid malt extract, and the corn sugar. And the word all was capitalized. So imagine some people are going, well, I'm just going to add a little. I don't want as much sugar. So it says add it all. Remember, this is what the yeast is going to be eating. Yeast is a live thing, and it needs to eat, and it likes sugar. Put it on some heat now, and I'm going to actually bring it up pretty high because I want this. I'm on an electric stove. I've been told that the only difference that matters is the amount of time that it's going to take to bring it up to a boil. So I'm just going to go ahead and kick it all the way up. Okay, so it is about 2 p.m. It has taken me about an hour on this electric stove to get something resembling a boil. Well, we've just basically left it alone and stirred it. I did make a mistake earlier. I should have brought the grain water up to a rolling boil before adding the extract. Apparently I haven't ruined my beer. I called my local brewmaster, Chuck, down at What Ails Ya, and he says that should be fine. He's more worried about my grains getting up to 180 degrees, so we'll see if that ruined it. So that's two mistakes I've made so far. I would consider a third mistake is even trying this on an electric stove. It seems to take a really long time to get 2.5 gallons of water up to boil. I don't think it should have taken an hour, even though we have this other stuff in here. But it is now, it's not really vigorous, but it is rolling. So we're now going to add the bittering hops, which is the Brewer's Gold bittering hops. Instructions say add a little bit at a time, and Chuck says to have some ice cubes standing by, because that's another trick to keep it from boiling over. He says you'll probably get a faster result with the foam going down with some ice cubes than you do with a spray bottle. But I got both standing by. It's about 2:01, so I will mark that in my book. This is the bittering hop stage, so I'm going to add about a third, I think, and I'm going to stir that in. And yeah, definitely starting to see some foam. It immediately changed the consistency here. And a little bit more. And this is the part where you really got to watch, apparently, for the boilovers. I've got a 5-gallon pot here, though, with only 2.5 gallons in it, so I should be okay. You don't want to get a boil over. The stuff is like molasses, apparently, when it boils over. It's very sticky and very hard to clean up. And if you do get a boil over, oh wow, the hops just hit me from that. That's a really nice smell. This is the part where it starts really starting to smell like beer. Purchasing your brewery items online might be a cheaper way to go. I opted to find a local brew place, a local home brew store, and to get into a relationship with him. I bought my entire kit from them. You can do whatever you like. Chuck down at What Ails You was really super helpful. He's the owner. And I like having the ability to give him a call on a brew day and say, hey, am I doing this right? So for the beginner brewer, I think that probably developing a relationship with somebody who has more knowledge than you, that you can call on the phone, that doesn't mind talking to you, probably would benefit you a lot. I know that, you know, I had that little problem with the temperature of the grains getting too much, and the fact that I didn't bring the wort to a boil before adding the malts, the malt extracts. And those two things kind of had me worried. I was able to give Chuck a call, and that put my mind at ease, at least for one of them. He seemed a little bit leery about the 180-degree thing, but we'll see if that ruined it. I hope not, because that's 5 gallons of beer down the drain instead of down my throat. So yeah, you know, stuff online is going to be a little bit cheaper, but developing a relationship with somebody that has more knowledge with you, in my opinion, is worth the I probably paid an extra $30 in everything that I purchased, but I'm able to call him at any time. A lot of these online places, they do have a 24-hour hotline, and but I don't know who I'd get a hold of. Would I get a hold of some 18-year-old kid who can't even drink beer? I don't know. I will be ordering some stuff online, but at least I have this relationship now with Chuck down at, you know, What Ails You, that is, you know, I can get good information from him. We have about 6 minutes before we got to add the finishing hops, but I'm going to take this time to go ahead and rehydrate my yeast. Again, I'm using an ale yeast. It's Nottingham ale yeast, rather than the yeast, the lager yeast that came with the kit. And I have 100 milliliters of warm water in this container. You want the temperature to be between 86 and 92 degrees. So I've tested that and made sure that that's the temperature that it's at. Before opening it, you want to make sure that it's not, your yeast package is not swollen. That would say that the yeast is probably contaminated and bad. So I have the yeast in here. I'm going to go ahead and add the yeast. And give it a stir. But you're supposed to pour it in there and then cover it. And let it sit for 15 minutes. All right, so it's about 5 minutes before the end of our boil, and this recipe calls us to add our finishing or aroma hops at the 55-minute mark. So this has been boiling for about 55 minutes. I'm going to add the aroma hops, and so we're just going to sprinkle a few in, do about half. It's not a lot, it's just 1/4 ounce. So it's exactly 256. Stir in the rest. So I'm going to boil this for about 5 minutes, and I'm going to take it off the heat. And immediately upon taking it off the heat, I'm going to grab my ice bag that I have in the back freezer, bring that as well as my 3 gallons of cold water out, and I'm going to create a real quick ice bath. I'm not going to use the cold water for the ice bath. I'm just going to use the ice. The cold water is the filtered water that I bought at the store, and that's going to go into the fermenter along with the wort to make 5 gallons of beer. Okay, so it's time to put it in a bath. A nice ice bath here for it. We've got a thermometer here. We want to bring this down to about 170 degrees. And then we're gonna mount it about 170 degrees. Let me get my notes, make sure that's right. Sorry, 110 degrees. I'm gonna bring this down to 110 degrees as quickly as possible. Apparently this is the cold break. So we have to get this down in temperature so that we can pitch the yeast at a certain temperature. So this is going to bring it down to 110. We're going to put it in the fermenter, and then we're going to pour cold water from about shoulder height. So the idea is to cool down the wort and also aerate the wort in the same step, so that we're not shaking the wort for a long time, so that we can got to get some air in there, because yeast needs air, and if you aerate the wort, how many times am I going to call it wort? It's not on my skin, it's in my belly. So we can cool it down, and we can add the yeast, because we want to get this sealed up as quickly as possible, as soon as the temperature is at the right temperature to pitch the yeast, and we don't want any external bacteria. So this is where our cleanliness and our sanitization steps really come into play, so that we don't accidentally introduce foreign bacteria or wild yeast into the fermenter. Okay, our wort is at about 110 degrees now, and we're going to pour it into our fermenter. Being sure not to get it on the floor. And we kind of want to pour this a little bit slowly, because if there's any sediment at the bottom, I don't want that into the fermenter. So I want to kind of hold that back. I'm just going to hold back that little last bit. All right, so now we're going to take the cold water and we're going to pour it from about shoulder height. Though I don't know how tall the guy was who wrote this. I'm 6'4", so I'm just going to try to... Just going to give it a quick stir and see if I can't knock some of this foamy goodness down. But apparently I'm not going to be able to. If I put my thermometer in there, I'm never going to get it back. And I don't want to put my hands in it at this point. With all this foam, I don't know how I'm supposed to take a hydrometer reading. It's supposed to float in there. I don't know how I'm going to do that. The foam feels cool. The problem here in Arizona is that it is currently 80 degrees inside my house, and I keep my house at about 80 degrees, and I'm supposed to pitch the yeast here at 72 degrees. And it's below that. Cool. So we got it down to, looks like about 70. So we got that. I stirred my yeast earlier. That's what our yeast looks like now. And I got my spoon. And I just want to double check and make sure I'm actually supposed to pitch the yeast now. So read my instructions really quick. I'm supposed to take a gravity reading now with my hydrometer. How am I supposed to do that? Well, I know of one trick. I saw online a guy used the bottle that his hydrometer came in to do a gravity reading. So let me set that up and we'll get right back to that, okay? Original gravity seems a little bit low. The original gravity is supposed to be 1.045, and I have a reading of 1.042 right now. So I don't know if that makes a difference, but I'm supposed to take that reading, so I am taking the reading. I've taken the reading. I took the reading in this tube here. I'm not going to be pouring this beer back into my batch because this could be contaminated, not contaminated. All right, so we're at the proper temperature. I've taken my gravity reading. I'm going to go ahead and add the yeast. Sorry, pitch the yeast. They get a little bit upset when you say add when you're talking about yeast, apparently. And take my brewing spoon. I'm going to stir it into the brew. It's now beer, by the way. Doesn't have any alcoholic content probably because it's just all sugars and we just added the yeast and the yeast hasn't had a chance to do anything. But it is considered beer. So I'm going to grab my fermenting lid, and as previously stated, I sanitize this and get this lid on. Make sure it's really seated well around the edges. All right, so that's our airlock. I'm going to seat that right in there. Nice and firm. That's going to allow air out, but no air in. That's why we put the liquid in there. So that's it for as far as the brewing. We're going to put this in my fermentation closet, and I'll show you what I have set up in there. I've outfitted my closet with a plastic sheet just because I've heard a lot of horror stories online about fermentation gone wrong and getting, you know, clothes and stuff dirty. There's no clothes in here, but we do have some pictures, so I hung up a plastic sheet and hooked it up with some clamps, and yeah, so we got the brew here at the bottom of this closet. I got it sitting in about 2 inches of water. I'm going to be taking this towel, wrapping it around it up top so that the towel hangs in the water down here at the bottom, and so that it wicks the water up and keeps this cool. I'm told you can get about 8 degrees of cooling just by doing this trick right here. And back here, it's usually around 80 degrees. So that's something that we don't want our beer to withstand. We want to keep it around 72, if not cooler. So I've got that trick, and then I've also got a couple of 2-liter bottles of water frozen in the freezer. And each day, if I need to, I'm just going to drop it back here in the back, and hopefully that will give us the temperature that we need. So, all right, it's in the water all the way around. I'm going to go ahead and drop the 2-liter bottle of ice back there, just because I hear in the first 24 hours is when you're going to get the most heat out of your fermenter. I've made sure that our airlock is clear and can operate properly. I don't know if you saw, but I put one of those stick-on thermometers here. It'll tell me the temperature, but since I got it wrapped in a towel, I'm not going to be able to tell what the temperature is. I found this at Home Depot, and it's just an outdoor thermometer, wireless, and I have the thermometer part in this plastic baggie and made sure that it's sealed up. And then I'm just going to stick this underneath the towel so that it is sunken in the water, and that will tell me the temperature of the water, which will tell me approximately what the temperature. It's going to be a few degrees difference inside my fermenter, a little warmer because the fermentation actually creates heat. So I'm hoping that this entire process will keep my beer around 68 to 72 degrees. So that's about it. And that was my first brew. We're going to see you back in probably a couple weeks when we do some bottling. And yeah, and then a couple weeks after that, we'll be enjoying it. So thanks for stopping by.